Hi, I'm Sue Montgomery, and welcome to Dying Talks. In this segment, we're going to talk about how you can make sure that your wishes are honored at end of life. Now, you might think that you're always going to be able to say what it is you want to have done or not have done. But that might not be the case. You don't know what's ahead on your journey. You don't know if you're going to be able to speak for yourself or if someone else will end up making decisions for you. So some really important things to have in place are called advance directives. Maybe you've already heard about those. Maybe you have all that outlined. I'm just not going to assume that because they're very, very important things to do to make sure that your wishes are honored. So the first thing to consider is whether or not, if you couldn't speak for yourself, who would speak for you? Now, in many instances, if you're married, it kind of just defaults to your spouse. But your spouse might not always know exactly what it is you want, depending on how much you guys have talked about this kind of thing. But the first thing to do though is to designate who it is that you would want, who you want to speak for you if you could not speak for yourself. So that's called a designated healthcare surrogate or a designated healthcare proxy. That needs to be somebody that you trust who will honor your wishes if you can't speak for yourself. So I encourage you to check that out. There are many resources online where you can get these forms, and it's good to have it all in writing. You need to do this in writing. Another form that's really important is the living will. And a living will shows, that's your chance while you're able to make your wishes known, to make them known in writing. So a living will doesn't say, it says, if these things happen to me, this is what I would or would not want to have done. I have a living will. I've had one for years. And basically, that is not the same as a do not resuscitate order. So if you think you have a living will, if you think you have a do not resuscitate order just because you have a living will, that's not the case. They are not the same. So let's check out more about getting a living will taken care of. And I'm going to have some resources on my website about that to give you some links to places. I can just tell you the National Association of Hospice and Palliative Care, National Hospice and Palliative Care Association, nhpco.org. They've got state-specific forms for all these things I'm talking about. So check that out. They're free. Another advance directive that's very important, to have if it aligns with your wishes is a do not resuscitate order. Now, you might want to be resuscitated until the very end. There's nothing wrong with that. It just depends on what your wishes are. But if you don't want to, if your heart would stop or if you would stop breathing and you do not want to be resuscitated, then you have to have one of those forms, a state-specific form that is signed by your physician in order for that not to happen. In other words, if you collapsed in your home and the paramedics were called, they are, obligated to resuscitate you unless you have a do not resuscitate form that's specific to their state, to that jurisdiction, available for them. Same thing if you end up in the emergency room. So just having it written, maybe in your living will or whatever, saying that you don't want to be resuscitated is not enough. Sorry, I just kicked the camera stand. So I'm just encouraging you. So a healthcare surrogate or a healthcare proxy, check that out. Check out a living will, and if a DNR is something, a do not resuscitate order is something that you want to have, then make sure you talk to your doctor about that. Lots of people don't want that. They want to be resuscitated and have everything done. Nothing wrong with that. Just depends on what your desires are. We just want to make sure that whatever you want, it's honored. So check those things out. I'll have more resources on the website. There's lots of information on the internet about those. The National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization is a great place to start. I'm Sue Montgomery. This is Dying Talks. God loves you, and so do I. I can never spit that out. So do I.